So hi everyone, thank you for attending this webinar today. My name is Jamal Gordon. I am a security compliance and identity architect here at CPS, and I'm going to take you through some foundational modern work and security topics that have been at the forefront of discussion with our customers this year. If you have any questions, we do have time at the end for a Q&A, but feel free to add your questions to the Q&A section in this Teams call, and I'll aim to answer them all towards the end of the session. Okay. So I've only got about half an hour, so this is going to be a bit of a quick whistle-stop tour of our modern work priorities for 2026, the importance of Microsoft 365 Copilot and how it plays a strategic role, not just in how we work today, but also how it has shifted our focus towards how we view data security. So we're also going to be taking a look at some of the Purview solutions that I think are key for successful data governance in our modern ways of working, right? So I'll start with a brief overview of our modern work and security priorities for 2026. In the last 7 or so years, we've seen a dramatic shift in how we interact with technology and each other at work, right? So about a decade ago, it was sort of an unexpressed expectation that you'd be in the office by 9 a.m. every day to start your work day. However, now we've seen a heavy shift towards flexible ways of working. So modern work has evolved to include remote, hybrid, flexible work models to enhance employee autonomy and balance. So as a result, we've been adapting to new norms, basically. Companies are adopting policies and culture to support evolving work styles that prioritize flexibility and productivity. And we've seen this in real time. So instead of everybody having workstations, we're seeing more people with laptops that allow for like free movement. Company benefits have started putting more focus on employee health and work-life balance, and things like acceptable use policies are being updated to include tighter company equipment, internet, and data security procedures. Building on this shift in mindset and policy, the next major priority is technology-enabled collaboration. Flexibility and hybrid work only functions at scale when people can collaborate effectively, regardless of location. So we've moved beyond email as our primary way of working. Today, real-time collaboration tools allow teams to co-create, communicate, and make decisions without needing to be in the same room or even in the same time zone in certain cases. Documents are no longer static files, they're living artifacts that multiple people can work on simultaneously. And meetings are no longer just about who is in the room, it's about how inclusive they are for remote participants. Chat, video, shared workspaces, and automation have become the core components of how work actually gets done, right? So what's important here is that technology is no longer just supporting work, it's shaping how our work happens. When it's implemented well, it reduces friction, speeds up decision making, and helps teams stay connected without relying on constant meetings. So we're more focused now on scalability and continuity. Modern work environments have to be resilient by design. Organizations can no longer afford systems or processes that only work when everything goes to plan, right? So whether it's business growth, organizational change, or unexpected disruption, work needs to continue with minimal impact. Scalability means being able to onboard new people quickly, support changing team structures, and adapt to new ways of working without having to rebuild everything from scratch. And continuity also ensures that knowledge, access, and operations don't depend on individual people or physical locations. We've learned that the ability to scale and remain operational isn't just an IT concern, it's a business priority. And we have a stronger focus on security. So as work becomes more flexible, more distributed, and more digital, the security perimeter has fundamentally changed. Security is no longer something that sits quietly in the background or is just handled by the IT teams, right? It's become a shared responsibility across the organization. And I think we've all felt that over the past few years. People are working from more places, on more networks, and across more devices than ever before. At the same time, the information we work with has become more valuable and more accessible. That means that modern work must be designed with security built in by default. It's not bolted on afterwards. This shift is about enabling people to work securely without slowing them down, having clear security practices, better awareness, and smarter controls to help protect company data while still supporting flexibility and collaboration. When security is done well, it becomes the enabler of modern work rather than a barrier to it. So our new ways of working don't come without challenges, right? As identity becomes our new security perimeter, credentials are targeted by attackers more, making identity security and MFA more important than ever. The increased use of cloud collaboration and data sharing has increased data exposure risks and made things like data governance harder to enforce. So ultimately, the more successful organizations will be the ones that balance trust and protection, empowering employees to work productively, whilst ensuring that data, systems, and identities are protected no matter where work happens. Now, I want to spend a moment just talking about Microsoft Copilot and why it has become such an important part of the modern work conversation. At its core, Copilot is augmenting how people work. It brings AI assistance directly into the tools that employees already use in their day-to-day, right? Helping them work more efficiently, stay focused, and reduce time spent on low-value tasks. Rather than introducing yet another standalone system or tool, Copilot works alongside existing workflows, and it helps people draft content, summarize information, surface insights, and get started faster, whether that's preparing for a meeting, writing a document, or catching up on something that they've missed. The value here isn't just about speed, it's reducing that cognitive load and helping people focus on the work that actually matters. From an organizational perspective, one of the key benefits of Copilot is consistency. So it helps to standardize how information is created, interpreted, and reused across teams. This can improve the quality, reduce duplication of effort, and make knowledge more accessible, right? So particularly in large or distributed organizations. Copilot also supports better decision making. So by helping users quickly understand large amounts of information, identify key themes, and summarize complex content, it allows people to spend less time searching and more time thinking. And that's especially important in fast-moving environments where context switching and information overload are common challenges. Another important benefit is scalability. So as organizations grow or change, Copilot can help new starters be brought up to speed faster. It can support people taking on new responsibilities and maintain productivity during periods of transition. It becomes kind of like a digital assistant, right, that scales with the organization rather than having to rely solely on informal knowledge or individual expertise. Our need to enhance productivity and collaboration with Copilot touches on many of the priorities we already discussed on the previous slide: flexible work, collaboration, continuity, and security. So when it's been deployed thoughtfully, it supports modern work in a way that's human-centered, secure, and aligned with organizational goals. An increasingly important priority within modern work is AI governance. So jumping off of the back of the AI topic, as artificial intelligence becomes embedded in our everyday tools, from drafting content and summarizing emails, analyzing data, organizations need to be clear about how AI is used, governed, and trusted, right? So AI is no longer experimental. It's no longer confined to specialist teams. It's becoming part of how work gets done day to day. AI governance is about ensuring that these capabilities are used responsibly, transparently, and safely. And without clear guardrails, there's a risk of inconsistent use, over-reliance on automated outputs, or unintended exposure of sensitive information. Governance helps define what AI can be used for, where human judgment is required, and how that accountability is maintained. A key aspect of this is trust. So employees need confidence that their AI tools are supporting them rather than making decisions without their oversight. And clear guidance on acceptable use, data handling, and ethical considerations help build that trust and encourages adoption in a healthy way. AI governance also plays a critical role in protecting organizational knowledge and data. So as people interact with AI systems using prompts, documents, and conversations, we need to ensure that sensitive or classified information is handled appropriately and not unintentionally shared or used or reused. Importantly, governance does not mean limiting innovation. In fact, good AI governance enables innovation at scale. By setting clear principles and boundaries, organizations give teams the confidence to use AI creatively and productively without fears of crossing invisible lines. It creates a consistent workflow that supports experimentation whilst reducing risk. And looking ahead to this year, to succeed, we need to treat AI not just as technology, but as a capability that requires our leadership, policy, and data security alignment. So as part of this conversation, why does SharePoint governance matter? Well, SharePoint is the primary content layer for Microsoft 365. It underpins Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, Search, and Copilot. So effective governance is about balancing collaboration, security, and compliance. SharePoint governance ensures the right people have the right access and no more. It protects against accidental data exposure, not just against malicious activity, and it is foundational for regulatory compliance and audit readiness. With Copilot governance, governance directly controls what AI can see, summarize, and reuse. And Copilot respects your existing Microsoft 365 security and compliance controls. So if SharePoint governance is weak, your Copilot implementation will magnify that risk. So let's take a look at some common governance failures that Copilot tends to expose, right? Things like using the access permission for everyone or all users on legacy sites, having no ownership or lifecycle controls on SharePoint sites, having sensitive content stored in sort of these general collaboration spaces, right? Having inconsistent or missing sensitivity labels, which we'll get onto in a moment, and having no visibility of your oversharing risks. So with these in mind, what does good governance look like in SharePoint? So good governance isn't just about locking everything down. It's about being very deliberate in what we do. So we can do things like using governance policies to control site creation, access, and sharing, right? We can apply data lifecycle management so content doesn't live forever by default. We can classify and protect our data so that Copilot outputs inherit the right controls. And then we can continuously assess oversharing risks and look to remediate those. Okay. So that leads perfectly onto the next topic, which is about Microsoft Purview, and which is Microsoft's built-in Microsoft 365 solution to help you manage your data security, compliance, and governance. This isn't just important when we're referring to Microsoft Copilot, okay? So AI has been the accelerator for us to look at our data security solutions with a magnifying glass. However, without AI in the picture, data security should always be foundational to how we view modern work. So just as a high-level view of Purview capabilities, so firstly, Purview helps you to discover and classify your data. It helps you understand what data you have, where it lives, how sensitive it is across your Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and your Microsoft Teams. And it helps you to identify sensitive information using sensitive info types. So sensitive info types, they're basically built in by Microsoft, or you can use your own custom-made ones that meet your organizational needs, and you can use those to apply labels to content. I'll get onto that on the next slide or so. Secondly, you can use it to protect data and prevent data loss. So we can prevent accidental or malicious data leakage wherever people work and collaborate using data loss prevention. So data loss prevention, and I'll probably start calling it DLP as we go. The policies cover emails, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and endpoints. And the goal is essentially is your solution to control oversharing and external exposure. We also use Purview to govern and retain our data. So we can meet our regulatory, legal, and audit requirements consistently by using retention policies. We can use records management, audit logging, and e-discovery. And finally, we also use Microsoft Purview to manage data-related risk. So data-related risk created by user behavior, not just external attackers. And we would do this looking at insider risk, communication compliance, and advanced audit investigations. So I will go into more detail on these in the following slides, but just as a high-level overview, these are the main focus areas when we're talking about data governance. So data classification. Data classification is important when we're discussing things like applying retention labels or sensitivity labels or data loss prevention to content, right? Classification can be achieved in different ways. We have out-of-the-box sensitive info types. So these are, think of them as these predetermined patterns that can help you discover and classify your sensitive data. So these will be things like credit card numbers, national insurance numbers, and passport numbers. We also have trainable classifiers. So these are used as machine learning models that we can train based on categories of sensitive data from your organization. Microsoft have over 100 built-in trainable classifiers that you can use straight out of the box, and they help you with identifying that content. So a few examples of where this is helpful: if you're looking for content that contains financial statements, health or medical records, resumes, or documents and messages that may contain things like targeted harassment, that's where you would look at these trainable classifiers. So like I said, you can create your own trainable classifiers, and they can be used and trained to meet your organizational or regulatory requirements. The third type of classifier here is exact data match. So this serves a purpose where your organization might have a specific list of data that you want to classify. So a good example of this is, let's say you've got student ID numbers, manufacturer product serial codes, or you might have highly sensitive project codes as well. So once these are created, our classifiers can be used in several compliance solutions, and we can use them to detect sensitive content, classify, protect, or retain them. So how do sensitivity labels actually protect your data in Microsoft 365? So at a high level, sensitivity labels allow us to classify our data and automatically enforce protection. And this is based on how sensitive that information is to your organization. So the key thing to understand is that this protection is data-centric, it's not location-centric. It doesn't matter whether the file is stored in SharePoint, OneDrive, or it's been emailed externally or downloaded locally, right? The protection travels with the data. So once a sensitivity label is applied, Microsoft 365 can either encrypt the content, so it's only authorized users that can open it. We can restrict access, so even if the file is shared outside of the organization, we can manage that. And we can control what users can and can't do. So things like preventing forwarding, copying of the content within the document, or printing it. This means that even if a document leaves your tenant, you remain in control. Okay. Sensitivity labels can also provide built-in awareness for users. So we can do things like put headers and footers on the documents, automated watermarks, or provide the users with policy tips. So these cues are used to help users immediately understand how that sensitive information should be handled. And in terms of best practice for sensitivity labels, we have a few tips here. So the first one is keep your label taxonomy simple. One of the most common mistakes we see organizations make is over-engineering their labels, especially on the first implementation. So use a small, clear set of labels. We want to align them with real business impact, and we want to make the difference between the labels very easy to understand. So essentially, align your labels with to business language, not IT language. If users can't decide which label to apply, adoption will suffer ultimately. Your label should also reflect how the business already thinks about information. So, for example, is it public? Is it internal? Is it sensitive or confidential? Right? Avoid technical terms and regulatory jargon where possible. We would also recommend combining user-driven and automatic labeling. Right, so we can either deploy labels to users so they can apply them to documents, or we can automatically label documents based on the sensitive information that it contains. A mature approach uses both. So we would use user-driven labeling for context and intent, automatic labeling for that consistency and risk reduction, and automatic labeling is especially important for things like personal data, where we might have financial data stored, and high risk or regulated information. This creates a safety net without removing user empowerment, right? And finally, match the protection to the risk. So not all data needs the same level of control. We can apply strong encryption and restrictions only where necessary, avoid blocking productivity for lower risk content, and gradually increase protection as sensitivity increases. So sensitivity labels are essentially stamped on your document, but they can be, increased or decreased based on the sensitivity of the content within that document. Data loss prevention. So DLP is the solution that we use to manage data loss via external sharing. So DLP identifies and prevents unsafe or inappropriate sharing of sensitive data. And the solution in Purview is best understood when we break it down into the building blocks that define what a DLP rule actually is. So that's what you can see on the slide. These are the 4 building blocks. So firstly, you'd need to define the conditions that need to be met. And this could come from the data containing one of the classifications we discussed earlier, or it has certain types of sensitive information in it. This could also include an action taken, such as the users attempted to send this externally via an email. The condition may also account for how many instances of sensitive data are present in that document. So there may be a difference between having one national insurance number in a document, and we may want to treat it differently if it's got 10, right? And we can also use sensitivity labels as a condition. So, for example, does this document contain the confidential label? Then we have the exceptions. So we can put exceptions in for specific users, groups, recipients, or maybe the document attributes will play a part here, right? And the policy will then ignore that. What are the actions we want to take when there's a policy match? So we can encrypt the document, we can restrict access, either restricting just the recipient that's external to your organization, or we can restrict access to the document entirely internally as well. And we can also allow user overrides to the policy in some cases. So you can allow overrides and require that if somebody does need to override the policy, let's say it's a false positive, they have to provide business justification, which is then logged and can be reviewed when we're looking at the audit logs. Lastly, what monitoring options do we have for DLP? So we can send notifications or raise alerts to our security teams when there's a match. We can also provide policy tips or send automated emails to users to raise awareness or educate them on incorrect sharing procedures. And we can also generate incident reports for further investigation and auditing purposes. So we have a few options there when it comes to monitoring and user education in that regard. Moving on to retention management. So retention management is managed within two solutions, and they're fairly similar, but not exactly the same. So data lifecycle management, which uses retention policies to manage your data retention requirements. And this is done per workload. So think of your workloads being SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Exchange, Microsoft Teams, or we might have a specific list of sites within SharePoint that we want to apply this to. So it's used to define a retention period based on when the content was either created or modified. And retention periods are automatically applied at that sort of workload or container level. With this solution, retention policies don't travel with the content, which means you can change the retention period of a document depending on which SharePoint site it's moved to. We might have, let's say, a site that's dedicated to finance, and we want to make sure everything in there is retained for a certain period of time, and a document may be in there that actually sits better within a different site. It will move into the retention period of the site that you've moved that into. And then the second solution here is records management, which uses retention labels. So we have policies and we have retention labels. And retention labels, they apply retention and deletion requirements at an item or document level. So it's more granular, right? We might have different retention periods that would apply to different individual items because they have different requirements, right? And this supports flexible retention and deletion schedules that can be applied either manually or automatically. Very similar to when we were talking about sensitivity labels, we can assign labels to users or to areas so they can label their documents for certain retention requirements, but we can also automatically apply retention based on what the content contains. We can also mark content for disposition reviews before deletion with retention labels. So when it comes to retention management, you don't need to choose between using retention policies and retention labels. Again, they can be used to complement each other to ensure that you have your organizational requirements are fully met, right? Another Purview solution that we have is insider risk management. So when we talk about insider risk, we're not just talking about malicious actors. In reality, most data incidents are caused by well-intentioned users making mistakes, accidental oversharing, sending information to the wrong place, or taking data with them when they leave. Insider risk management helps you to identify both malicious and inadvertent risky behavior. So it can monitor user activity across Microsoft 365. It can correlate multiple signals over time, and it highlights patterns of risky behavior. So there are two main scenarios that are used within insider risk management. The first one being looking at general data leaks, and this is where we're focusing more on unintentional or malicious sharing of information outside of the organization. So these are things like sharing sensitive files externally, uploading data to unapproved locations, or just triggering high severity DLP alerts. The second scenario is data theft by departing users, which is a very common and real risk. So as users approach either their resignation date or termination dates, sometimes behavior can change, right? So insider risk management looks for risk indicators commonly associated with data exfiltration. Things like unusual downloading from SharePoint or OneDrive, or printing a large volume of files, right? They might be copying data to a personal cloud storage account or a USB device or messaging services. So what's important here is the timing and the correlation. So a single download might not be suspicious, but the same activity close to an employee's departure date could be a strong signal, right? And yeah, this allows you to essentially detect potential data theft early, give yourself enough time to take proportionate action and protect intellectual property where you may have sensitive information. Insider risk management also comes with insider risk analytics. So this is a dashboard that provides insights based on the same signals that's used by insider risk management. And it identifies potential areas of high user risk based on your organizational norms. So how do people typically work within your organization? Does anybody sit outside of that, that typical way of working? So it works out of the box, meaning there's no complex configuration required to get the dashboard up and running. And the insights from this dashboard can help to drive improvements in insider risk management by helping you identify those areas of high risk and highlighting key areas to focus on for further policies, or where you may need to use different tools within Purview to reduce that risk. And lastly, as we discussed earlier in the session, as organizations adopt generative AI like Microsoft 365 Copilot and potentially other third-party tools, the risk profile changes. The question is no longer just where's my data stored, it becomes how is my data being used by AI and who has access to it. So Microsoft introduced DSPM for AI as their data governance solution for generative AI platforms. DSPM for AI focuses on visibility and control, basically. So understanding who is using AI, what data AI systems have access to, where sensitive information might be exposed or overshared. And it helps you to identify those gaps in your data governance or data controls. It also looks at shadow AI, which is one of the fastest growing risks in modern organizations. So users are often well-intentioned, trying to work, faster or smarter, but they may be copying and pasting sensitive data into AI tools that the organization doesn't control. So DSPM for AI helps to identify that hidden usage of third-party AI tools, understand how widespread that usage is, and assess the potential risk of sensitive data being submitted to those tools. The thing is, you can't protect what you can't see, right? And shadow AI is often completely invisible without having the right controls in place. Another capability is that DSPM for AI provides insight into your tenant's Copilot usage. So this allows you to understand how Copilot's being used and uncover hidden risks in natural language prompts. And it can also detect sensitive information exposure. So as we said, your governance within SharePoint controls what Copilot can bring back to a user when they prompt it. We can help detect whether there's sensitive information frequently being responded to. And DSPM for AI also identifies data oversharing. So particularly within SharePoint Online, DSPM for AI assessments can be configured, and these can evaluate things like at the top SharePoint sites you have by risk level, where your data may be over-permissioned, or where sensitive data is accessible more broadly than you initially intended. So this is especially important because AI tools like Copilot, they do respect those existing permissions. So if your data is overshared and users are using Copilot and prompting it, it can surface anything that the user has access to that they may not have or be required to have access to as part of their role. Thank you very much for attending. If you found this interesting and you want to know how us at CPS can help you in your data governance journey, feel free to drop us an email or give us a call using the details on screen. And have a great day. Hopefully I will be speaking with some of you again very soon. So thank you very much and take care.